welcome to the Divorce Duo. I'm John Knocklinger.
And I'm Christina Previtt.
And we are the owners of Previtt and Knocklinger, a family law firm in central and northern New Jersey. We practice divorce and family law. You can find us on the web at centraljerseyfamilylaw.com. You can follow us on Twitter at NJFamLaw. You can find us on Facebook like the rest of the world. And you can just search Previtt and Knocklinger, or you can, if you can't spell that, you can also go to PNLawNJ. And you can email the show at divorceduo@gmail.com. So how are you doing today, Christina?
I'm good. Happy St. Patty's Day.
Yes, you're hearing this in the morning. If you haven't listened to our show before, we do tape this at night, so it is St. Patty's Day, and we don't have beer on the table, but we certainly have wine.
Yes, we're observing the holiday like everyone else and drinking alcohol. And we thought it would be a really great idea to do it on the air.
Well, we just started, so we'll see how the show goes,
Yes.
and we'll see how things are moving right along.
That way, if we start slurring, you'll just know why.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure you are just jumping up and down and so excited at just how well your favorite dude, Donald Trump, is doing.
I'm so thrilled, so happy.
You know, when I looked at the Rolling Stone from March 10th, it was just so happy to see that nice blonde hair cartoon of Donald Trump right on the cover.
I just can't even believe it.
I mean, it's, you know.
And notice he has the biggest head there of anybody on the cover.
And of course, the smallest hands. We've already decided you like how small his hands are. No, it's very good. I mean, I like the pitchfork.
It's
on the
amazing.
cover.
It's like we're watching a reality show.
We really are. I love how Ted Cruz looks like he's wearing a what are these outfits called that it's such one piece?
It looks like a superhero outfit, like a big unitard.
He's carrying a torch and looks just as ugly here as he does in real life. Ugh. Anyway, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what's been in the news. All right.
Nice touch, John.
Thank you.
We don't have to pay you extra for that, do we?
Yes, you do. So we've been talking a little bit about on the show about the Supreme Court vacancy at the United States Supreme Court vacancy. So in the last week, we had President Obama nominate a judge named Merrick Garland. He's the chief judge of the Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, which basically is the second most powerful court in the country. That's really all you need to know. And he was nominated. He's 63 years old, which is a little bit old to be nominated to the Supreme Court. Usually you want someone young that's going to be there forever. But he's old.
Be careful, John. To some people, 63 is young.
Well, it's not like he's going to die tomorrow, but he's older, right? And he's white. So now we got another white guy on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, a white male.
I mean, very exciting. But interestingly, in the past week, since we discussed our favorite governor, Chris Christie, and his continuing battle with the legislator here in New Jersey for the vacancy on our Supreme Court, nothing has happened other than everyone is in their corners. And as you might imagine, the Bar Association, everyone else is telling Chris Christie he doesn't know what he's doing, and Chris Christie, in his usual form, is telling everyone else they're wrong, and that he can do whatever he wants to do because he's the governor. And, here comes in the cavalry. But I got to tell you, I mean, it's all really silly, and a lot of people in the legal community are starting to get really nervous about what's going to happen. I mean, really nervous. It's not just a little nervous. In fact, I have a case right now in front of a judge who we won't name, who's up for reappointment very, very soon. And I can only imagine what this judge is going through, knowing that,
Yeah, just remind people what you're referring to.
Well,
about tenure.
So in New Jersey, judges get appointed for a 7-year term, and then they have to be reappointed and reconfirmed after 7 years for a lifelong job on the bench until they turn 70, which is our mandatory retirement age in New Jersey. So after 7 years, if they're not reappointed by the governor and reconfirmed by the Senate, they lose their job. And once you're a judge, trying to go back and be just a little old lawyer, I think is a little difficult.
Yeah, I would think that's hard. I think just like when you become self-employed, it's really difficult to go back and just, get a traditional job where you're working for someone else. I imagine it must be really hard to go from being a judge to just going back out into practice.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. So, all right, so we'll keep you updated on what's going on there. You can also follow our Facebook and Twitter feeds because we are keeping everyone up to date on a daily basis what's going on. So today's topic is college contribution. And, it's something that most people have gone through either as a parent or as a student themselves. So what kind of experience did you have when you went to college?
Well, when I went to college way back, all those years ago, I know it was just yesterday for you, John. Basically, my experience was that once I hit 18 and graduated from high school, I was, like, okay, kid, you're on your own. We helped you out and got you through high school, and, now you got to pay rent and you're on your own. So that was my experience. I didn't even get $20 for gas. So I did everything myself. I had to have a job. I had to get my own car. I had to pay my own insurance and, take out loans for school. And, I don't think about it too much. I don't sit around and feel sorry for myself, but that's just how that was my experience. And I know that that's not everyone's experience, and that's not, in the line of work that we do, that's not what we see very often. More often we see our clients wanting to help their kids and pay for school and pay for a lot more than just school, but pay all of their living expenses too. So a lot of times people get into a dispute about that, exactly who pays and how much and, what's a reasonable lifestyle for a college student.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had a very different experience going to college. I was lucky enough when I went to college initially to be on a full scholarship. My parents I didn't have to have that conversation with them because they really didn't have to pay very much for me to go to school. But I know that as I went on through college, and then my brother, who, as we like to say in Texas, bless his heart, he didn't get any scholarships when he went to college. So, my parents took out the parent student loans, or we call them Parent Plus loans.
Plus loans, yeah.
And which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And I know that my parents just finished paying off those loans recently. So it's the kind of thing where, maybe you're saving for retirement and you've been paying off your debt, then your kids go to school, and if you want to pay for them to go to school, you're taking out loans and now you're indebted again. So everyone's got a very different experience. I was lucky enough, a little bit different from Christina. I was lucky enough that my parents didn't leave me with any debt when I left undergrad. Now, when I went to law school, I paid for it all on my own. And by pay for it all on my own, I mean, I'm still paying for it and I'll be paying for it
Me
for the
too.
next who knows how many years. So, but New Jersey is very unique in that most states don't require parents, divorced or intact, to pay for college. In New Jersey, we compel people. You were punished once when you got divorced, and now you get punished again whenever your kids go to school, because the kids are in a better place if you're divorced than if you're intact. It's kind of funny.
Yes, they are.
It's kind of funny. I mean, if I was a kid, I'd be like, oh God, I hope my parents get divorced, because then at least if one of them doesn't want me to go to school, the judge will compel them both to pay. So anyway, New Jersey is very unique, which that leads us to sort of the 10 questions that you need to know answers to when we look at college contribution.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The reason we're bringing this up now, the reason this is a good topic now is because this is really the time that if you have a senior in high school, you should be thinking about this stuff and really doing the things on this checklist pretty soon if you haven't started it already, because before you know it, your child is going to be starting college and going through the whole, right now you're probably more focused on the application process and the admission process, but you really need to start the process talking about who's paying for what, because you can't wait till the day school starts or that day that you get a term bill in August to start worrying about how you're paying. Just because it's a lengthy process if you're not in agreement on who's paying what.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first point on this topic is, when do you address college in a settlement agreement? So depending on how old your kids are at the time, it could be a very important issue. If, for instance, if your kids are already in high school by the time that you're negotiating your settlement, then it's probably something that's going to be more relevant to you at that point in time. And you might be in a position already to start talking about who's going to pay for what, because you already know in a couple of years your child is going to be in college, and maybe you don't expect your income to change very much over the next couple of years. So you probably are in a better situation where you can talk about those things. But if your kids are only 2 and 4, or even if they're just in grade school, it's really too soon to start talking about that. You have no idea where you're going to be in your life over the next 5 to 10 years. You don't know what your kid's going to want to do. You don't know if they're going to want to stay in state, or if they're even going to want to go to college at all. You know, they might just decide they want to be an actress and run off to Hollywood. So you don't really know any of that. Whatever, that was good. I like that. What do you think, John?
Oh, I agree. I mean, whether you're going to address it or not really depends on whether or not you want to have the same fights and the same battles and spend more money sometime later. But on the flip side, you don't want to address it when the kids are too young, because too many things might change either in the law or in your personal circumstances that you may not anticipate, and you might have an agreement that didn't fully address whatever the changes are, and you might be stuck with a bad situation. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if the kids are in high school, you should address it in your agreement.
Absolutely.
Period. If they're younger than high school, I think there's sort of a split sort of decision on whether you address it, how much detail you put into the agreement, whether you just rely upon what the law is going to be at that time, because I think, or I fully anticipate, that there's going to be a movement to change the law at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really has already started. I expect that at some point in the future, not too distant future, the law will be that a parent doesn't have an obligation to pay for college. Right now, that is the law in the state of New Jersey, that you do have to contribute. To the extent to which you have to contribute is not, there's no bright line rule for that. But most likely, most parents will be on the hook for some contribution towards college. But I think that may change.
And that's what we're all going to be doing whenever it changes,
Yeah.
because I really think this is one of the most unfair laws that we have.
Well, there are a lot of people, though, that lawyers and just the public in general, that feel that this law is favorable, because a lot of people do want to help their kids go to school. And if you have one parent that feels that way and the other one doesn't, the parent that wants to help will not be able to compel the other one to contribute any longer. So
Yeah.
it's almost like the nice guy will be the one that gets stuck for paying for everything.
Yeah, it's what we always do, though. We try to make one size fits all for everybody, and it ends up being unfair to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think what is unfair sometimes is when you have a situation where maybe you have someone like me who did put themselves through school. If I have a child, I may feel the same way, that I did it, and I feel like my child should have to do that too. You're not really allowed to have that opinion if your spouse doesn't agree.
Oh, absolutely. So now that you've decided that you want to address it in your settlement agreement, number 2 question is, how do you actually address the college expenses in terms of how they're divided in your agreement? Well, if your kids are a senior in high school, let's say, you know what your financial circumstances are, you know what your spouse's financial circumstances are. You're getting a divorce, so you know how much each of you is going to have in terms of assets and liabilities, and you know what everyone's income is. You can go ahead and decide exactly how you're splitting college then. There's no point in 6 months relitigating. You might as well go ahead and figure it out then. But what if it's a little bit earlier, Christina? Let's say it's your kids are a freshman in high school, so you want to address it. But let's say you're representing the spouse that has more money, the person that would, let's say, have to contribute more. What would you say that you would put into a settlement agreement to protect that person?
Well, what I usually do in that instance, I speak with my client and advise them that I believe that the law may change relatively soon and this is even more relevant if the kids are younger, that, if you agree in your agreement to pay for something, if it's definitive that you're definitely going to contribute, then you're probably not going to be able to wiggle out of that later if the law changes. So if you would like to take advantage of the change in the law at a later date, you probably should not put a provision where you're absolutely agreeing to pay. An alternative for that person may be that you'll pay in accordance with the law at that time. So that means if the law does change and you don't have an obligation according to the law, then that's what would apply. I have to say, though, I have raised this issue with many parents that are what we call the advantaged spouse. They're the ones making more money. And every one of them has said, no, I want to pay for my child's college, so I'm not going to try to wiggle out of that. So they're comfortable putting it in the agreement.
Well, you know what? I've seen situations where adversaries, where I've represented the person making more money, and there's no end in sight to the fact they'll be making more money. I've gotten settlement offers from adversaries who represent people making a lot less, who just say, we're going to split college 50-50.
No, I don't like that. I don't really like doing that ever, unless you have the child is about to go to school and you've already agreed that that's what we want to do. But if it's too far off into the future, even if it's 2 years from now, I don't really like to put a proportion there, even if it's 50-50, because there's just too much that could change. What if you lose your job and you're really struggling and you end up living off of assets and you can no longer pay 50%? You're stuck with it. You can't change it.
I think that's really the key, is that these settlement agreements, judges will enforce the words. And I will tell you, there is a movement afoot. Maybe it's the intermediary step between where we are now and where we might be in the future with no college contribution, where I see judges and lawyers pushing this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule, where mom pays for a third, dad pays for a third, and the kid pays for a third.
I don't really like that either, because that just assumes that everybody's on equal footing.
No, absolutely. But it's something, it's popular. If you're going through a divorce or if you're in a situation where you're dealing with college expenses after your divorce, you may hear something about this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule. And just know that it's out there, and it may or may not be fair to your case. But I think why people like it is it has the student have some skin in the game.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Of course, for me, I wouldn't be offended if the child had to pay for everything, because that's what I did. But those are my values, and I don't feel it's appropriate for me to impose my values on other families. So if other families think that that's appropriate for their child to contribute, then they should talk about that, and they should have that reflected somehow in their agreement. What we see more typically is that there will be a provision that the child will apply for all forms of financial aid and take out, guaranteed student loans or whatever they may have available to them, and everything on top of that or after that's applied, that's what the parents decide who's paying what there between the two of them.
No, absolutely.
So to answer the question with respect to how do you address it, you can be as specific as you want to be, but it really depends on your circumstances, or just indicate it very broadly that you'll just determine the issue at the time. But I think the important point there is that you need to talk with your attorney at the time and determine, is it in my best interest, in my child's best interest, to address this in a more specific way, or maybe even just to leave it out entirely.
Mm-hmm. The key being, think about your future and think about what you really need out of life. So, all right. So moving on to number 3.
Yeah, so when do you start the process? So I think we touched on that already. And if you want, I think once your child is a senior in high school, I would suggest no later than January. I know that you're probably preoccupied with admissions and the whole application process, but you really have to consider all of it together. You have to consider admissions, what schools you're applying to, what schools you may want to visit, because I know a lot of people have disputes over that, and because that can become very expensive. And filling out the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and talking about how much financially they may get, but who's going to pay? Because oftentimes what we see in our offices, you have maybe the mom doing it, maybe the dad. Someone is sort of the lead on that particular issue, and the other one's not really doing much. Mom may be the one doing it and sending dad emails here and there that
Whatever.
yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
Or what you get sometimes, I'm sure you've seen this both ways, John, is you get the mom, and I'm generalizing because sometimes it's the dad, but you might get the mom who's doing everything and maybe intentionally or not, leaving out dad completely. Dad doesn't get any say in what schools the kid applies to and, going to the schools to visit and all of that. So those are things you have to start talking about early. I say January. So we're now in March, almost April. If you haven't started doing any of that, you really should, because you're going to be behind the 8 ball come June, July, August.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's too late right now. You could still do it, but I mean, I think January is really the latest you should do it. I mean, the way college has been working now is that most kids are actually.
John, you're not drinking your wine.
I'm trying to pay attention. What your little lecture you just gave was so enthralling that I had to listen to every. Everyone take note. Christina's on her second glass, so I think it's going to get even better. So, yeah, I don't think it's too early to start. In fact, I think the earlier you start, the better. So let's move on to number 4, which is what's included in college expenses. So we'll start this before the break. Some things are very easy. Tuition, fees, room and board.
Mandatory fees, right?
Well, yeah.
Registration fees and things like that.
Yeah, mandatory fees. Textbook and course-related materials. So that includes, if you've got the science labs and stuff, and you have to go out and buy all those supplies that you have to bring with you.
Books.
Absolutely. And then there's a bunch of other things that people fight about. Those are the easy things that we just went through. Everything else people fight about. But the things that we think are included in college expenses are the gym and fitness center. If you go to a university where there's lots of sports going on, particularly Division I schools, you've got to pay for those sports tickets. I think that's included in college expenses. Health insurance. Christina was telling me earlier when we were preparing for the show that it's automatically put on your bill. But if you have health insurance, or I guess even if you don't, actually under the new healthcare law, I think everyone has to have health insurance.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that, and that's the reason I noticed it, because it's become an issue in some of my cases where the father, let's say, was maintaining the child on his health insurance and paying for it, obviously, but then they were charging the child on their term bill every year. And you really have to read the fine print, I think, with the school and whatever their health policies are there. They might have to pay that fee just to have access to clinics and things like that. So if you think that's important, you should probably keep that.
Well,
but you should investigate, because you could be paying for health insurance twice.
Well, I mean, that was a very important point. I mean,
Yes.
not for just college. Read the fine print. I don't understand why people don't read everything when they're about to sign up for something. Read the fine print. You find so much information in the fine print.
Yeah, it usually becomes more of an issue when you've got, let's say mom's the one who doesn't want to pay, and she starts scrutinizing the bill, and she sees, well, why is there a $500 health insurance charge on there? I don't know if I agree with you about the sports tickets, though, John.
Well, we'll continue this discussion after the break. You're listening to The Divorce Duo on PANJRadio.com. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Anderson,
And I'm Laura Mangone.
and we are here to introduce the new show on PANJRadio.com. It's called
Food for Thought.
We'll be talking about restaurant reviews, restaurant pet peeves, catering nightmare stories, and a whole lot more.
Starting on January 15th at 1 p.m.
On PANJRadio.com.
Are you having fun running your business marketing? Or does online marketing and social media overwhelm you? Would you like to use Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat, or LinkedIn, to name just a few online social marketing opportunities to market your business successfully? Amplify Your Voice can help. We work exclusively with local businesses in the PA&J radio target area of Hunterdon, Mercer, and Bucks counties, offering social media workshops, one-on-one coaching, managed services, direct online marketing, and web design. Contact us today at 973-615-5287 or email us at radio@ampyourvoice.com for a free no-obligation review of your online marketing. You can also visit us at www.ampyourvoice.com. Amplify your voice in a crowded market. Together, we will put the fun back in your business marketing.
PA&J Radio serves Mercer, Bucks, and Hunterdon counties and the world, and we want to serve your business on our airways. Commercial rates start at just $50 for a 30-second spot on your favorite PA&J show. We run your ad not just once, but up to 7 times in a 1-week period. That's a lot of bang for your buck online. We will track the number of listeners your commercial gets, so you can measure how many new customers you get from airing it with us. For more information, please contact Rob at panjradio.com or call 609-460-4550. We can't wait to bring your company new local business on PA&J Radio.
You're back with the Divorced Duo. When we took our break, we were talking about what expenses are included in college expenses. And during the break, Christina had told me that she did not agree with me that sports tickets are included with college expenses.
I don't agree that it's automatically included. I mean, obviously, I think maybe we forgot to mention that you're guided by whatever's in your settlement agreement. So some of the settlement agreements will be very specific and say what's included. But generally, I see that more as recreation. I don't really see that as a necessary college expense.
Well, let's go to something else that people might fight about: Greek expenses, fraternities and sororities. Is that included?
Again, you're guided by your settlement agreement, but I think if push comes to shove and you're in court, probably an analysis would include some consideration of what the child's lifestyle is and maybe what the parties anticipated they would be paying for. But I don't think that that's automatically included. I don't think that that's just an automatic part of going to college.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. But things that I do think are included, and I think we both agree: transportation to and from school. So depending on where the school is, that might mean airfare, or that might just mean supplying a car for the child to be able to drive back and forth to school. And then you have to take note of what the transportation system is like at the school. A lot of schools have bus systems, so maybe the child doesn't need a car while at school, or maybe the kid needs a car. But those are definitely expenses that are included, but it's a matter of degree and what kind of expenses
Yeah,
are
and I
included.
do think there's some overlap with child support because college expenses is, I think, is distinct from the child support payment that may be from one party to the other. So I certainly think the argument can be made that if, let's say, mom, I'm going to generalize, mom is getting child support, that transportation might be included in some of that. So I don't think, there's no bright line rule there.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the bottom line is it's unclear what things beyond the mandatory things are included in college expenses, but that's certainly something you'll negotiate in your settlement agreement, or you'll argue to a judge. So moving on to number 5, which is how do you handle pre-college expenses? So how do you handle them,
Yeah,
Christina?
so that what we consider to be pre-college expenses are some of the things we've mentioned already, like admissions fees and the applications fees, and maybe you have to make a deposit, and I think visiting campuses is if that's something that you do. Again, I consider that generally to be part of college expenses, but I think that mentality may be because I generally see that written in settlement agreements, and I think that, there you go, John, good. So you're not too far behind me with the wine. I think that's most people generally, when they start discussing these things, I think most people agree that that's all part of the whole college expenses analysis.
Yeah, I don't think any of that's included in child support. I think that's all part of the college expenses. And I encourage people, when you're doing a settlement agreement, go ahead and specify those things so that you don't have the argument. It's very important. I think the visits to schools, I've seen that come up quite a bit. What's too much, which parent gets to go. So those are things that you should address first before you start getting into arguments later on. So number 6 is, how does the school selection process work? And quite frankly, I'm from Texas, if you missed our first show. So it's a little bit different down there. Most people go to a big state school.
I thought you just talked funny, John.
Oh, bless your heart.
I love you.
Isn't that just funny? Here you go.
I am drunk right now. Well, I'm not really drunk. Drinking wine.
Yeah.
I'll love you a lot more later.
I was gonna say, tell the cops of Lambertville when you're driving home. So, you're gonna want to look and see what the aptitude is of the child. I mean, if you've got a kid that in high school was making B's, C's, and D's, should you be going on 3 or 4 trips out to schools that they have no chance of getting into? I
Yeah,
don't
like
know.
Harvard,
Yeah, or
Stanford.
should they be going to an expensive private school where they're getting no scholarships and the parties are having to pay $50,000 a year if they weren't very good in high school? Maybe they should go to, a community college for a couple of years, one of the county community colleges, and get 2 years under their belt, which, quite frankly, I think from a cost perspective, more students should take advantage of.
Yeah, I think the dispute that we see very often is you get one parent that really wants to indulge the child and let them go wherever they want. Maybe they want to. I had a case one time, the kid wanted to go to Fordham, and it was extremely expensive. It was at least, at the time, I think it was $40,000. Well, I don't remember if it was a year or per semester, but at the time it was extremely expensive. And she really didn't have any reason that she needed to go to Fordham. She just wanted to live in New York and she had friends there. And that was really the reason she wanted to go there.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's what she sounded like too. And, I think you have to think about those things, that you might have one parent that says, why don't you stay in New Jersey and go to Rutgers and see if that works for you first. I think those are valid objections.
No, I think it is, and where the kid's going to go to school. This is where the communication while you're deciding where the kid goes to school with both parents is important, because both parents need to decide: do you have the financial wherewithal for them to go to whatever school they're looking at? And if they don't have that wherewithal, they shouldn't be going. I mean, there are certain exceptions. I mean, my view is if your child gets into an Ivy League school, you should mortgage everything you own so they can go to an Ivy League school, because they will get such a step up on everyone else in the world, because unfortunately that's still the way our country works.
That's right, but I just want to point out, because this is something that I'm very sensitive about, is those are your values.
Yeah.
So somebody else might not feel that way. So you do have to take that into consideration. Somebody else might say, I'm not going to get into $1 million in debt into my retirement so that my child can go to Harvard.
Yeah, although I will tell you that I think most judges would err on the side of making parents contribute a little bit more if their child is that intelligent and they're getting into that quality of school, because really, college expenses all goes back to the child. It's what's in the best interest of the child. It's not what's in the best interest of the parties or what's good for them. Because if it was good for them, the parent that's really the problem probably doesn't want to pay a dime anyway. And if they have it their way, they're, valedictorian from Colts Neck High School or something, one of the best schools in the state, should be going to, Middlesex County Community College, because that's cheap for them. So,
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree with that. I see too many parents say, well, First of all, I have to say, I'm so sick of hearing about this Rutgers rule. I get so many parents that ask me about this Rutgers rule. There is no such thing. Have you ever heard? I mean, we've heard clients say it, but it doesn't exist in law. People seem to think there's this rule that you can limit tuition to the cost of an in-state college.
This is me every time I'm asked that question.
I mean, we ask for it, but there's no law that says you have to do that. So keep that in mind as well.
Oh, absolutely. So that's a little, so you have to be cognizant of where kids are going to school. So that leads to number 7, which is actually a subspecialty of my intelligent,
That's
beautiful
right.
partner
A
over here.
subspecialty.
So number 7, how does financial aid factor into
Yes.
college contribution?
Well, I think we mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I will say that I worked as a financial aid advisor at a college for probably about 5 years before I was an attorney. Yes, quite an accomplishment. And so I think that information that I learned during that time has been very valuable working in family law, because most people don't really understand exactly what the financial aid process is. They don't even really understand what financial aid is. And it's different types of aid, such as grants or student loans, that a child can take out just by virtue of filling out a FAFSA form. So if you have a child going to college, you probably already know what a FAFSA form is. You've probably heard it a million times. So when you fill that out, your child is applying for different types of aid, and you're going to get different letters telling you whether he or she was eligible for one type of aid. TAG is one. It's a student grant in the state of New Jersey.
Was that English?
Shampoo. Pell is a federal grant. And then there's also student loans. And I will tell you that every student qualifies for a student loan, a Stafford student loan, as long as they are meeting certain requirements in school. I think you have to be registered for at least 6 credits. And everybody gets this. The only people that don't are ones that have defaulted on a previous student loan. And I think also if you've committed certain drug offenses, you're not eligible for a period of time. But most people aren't going to fall into that category. So really look into that. You have to analyze what your financial aid documents you're getting from school and ask questions. Go to your financial aid office and ask questions. But be very mindful of that. And the dads should be getting that information. The moms should be getting that information to make sure that they're not paying for something that is the child's already getting from the school.
And everything you just heard Christina say is way more than your attorney's going to know. Trust me, because I don't know. Anytime this even comes up, I just look at her and I say, please help me, because it's really not something that many people know. In fact, everyone who fills out the FAFSA form, I always hear all the time is, who should fill it out? Should dad fill it out, mom fill it out? What's going on? What part of the other party's assets should be on the form? Should the child's working? Should that be on the form? There's so many questions. You really, I think once you figure out which school you're going to, there's probably a financial aid officer at the school that you should talk to and find out exactly what you should do to get the most money, most free money, number 1, and then the lowest interest money, number 2. I got to tell you right now, can you believe the student loan interest is approaching 7% for a federal loan?
I can't believe it. I can't believe how much it costs to go to college.
I mean, and all they would have to do is just lower the interest rate. I mean, really, I don't even understand. Foreign people, other countries buy our debt at lower interest rates than our own students are borrowing money from the government. It's outrageous, but I don't think anyone really, I certainly don't hear your man Donald Trump talking about it.
I heard Hillary talking about it.
Did you? Mm-hmm. Was she telling the truth?
I don't know. She's a good liar.
Yeah, well, she is a lawyer.
She has a good poker face.
Yeah.
Unlike Donald Trump, do you see some of the faces he makes?
To quote the kid on Liar Liar, when the teacher asks, "What does your father do for a living?" He goes, "He's a liar," and the teacher's like, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, he goes to court and talks to the judge," and the teacher's like, "Oh, you mean a lawyer?" And he just goes, like same thing.
We don't all lie.
No, but plenty of lawyers do.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
let's move on to number 8. Where what situations where one parent is alienated from the child going to college cause some level of concern in these cases. And we do have a case out there where basically a girl went to college for, I think, the entire time, and then they made an application to try to get the dad to pay for the loans that she incurred.
4 years after, when she
Yeah.
was done.
Yeah. And she had had no contact with him, I think, in many, many years. I don't know how long. But that
Yeah.
happens quite frequently where, in a divorce, children take sides. They're pissed off at dad for whatever reason. They're pissed off at mom for whatever reason. And unless there's a legitimate reason why there's no relationship, for example, was there child abuse of some kind? Was there some kind of physical violence? Is there some reason why the child doesn't want to have a relationship? Or alternatively, has the parent who's sort of not having the relationship, have they been trying to have a relationship and the child's sort of been brushing them off? If that's the case, there is an argument to be made that the parent that's been alienated shouldn't have to pay for college. I mean, you shouldn't have to pay for college for the kid that wants to have nothing to do with you.
Yeah, and I really think what's important here is the reason that there's no contact. Because if it's because, I'm going to generalize again, I don't want to offend anyone. If dad just walked off and never saw the kid, it never made any effort to see the kid, that's not going to do it. If mom, however, was intentionally interfering with the parent-child relationship with the other parent, then for a period of time, not a couple of weeks, that really made the relationship deteriorate, then I think there's an argument to be made that dad shouldn't pay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's an argument to be made. I can tell you it's not a very effective argument.
I've never seen it win.
Yeah, I haven't seen it win either, but I will tell you that there is a statute that is under consideration at the state legislature that the Bar Association has been supporting that would specifically make part of the statute that if a child without cause doesn't have a relationship with one parent, that parent would not have to pay for college. So there is some movement afoot to make college more fair in that respect, because I think that's why a lot of people are really pissed off about the fact that they might have to pay for college. So moving on to number 9, when is enough enough?
Yeah, so what we mean by that is, when are you done? How long does this kid get to go to school? If you've got a kid like Sean Penn in, what is it, Fast Times at Richmond High? I'm really dating myself now. Who just goes to school and smokes weed all day and, is taking ceramics and, basket weaving for 4 years. When are you off the hook? So generally, and this is usually in your settlement agreement, but if you're crafting your settlement agreement right now, you want to consider, how long do I really give this kid a reasonable amount of time to finish college? Sometimes 4 years is not enough. We usually think of college as being 4 years, but there are times when your kid might be there for 5 years, or sometimes even a little bit longer.
Yeah, certain majors like engineering,
Yes.
architecture.
Yeah, really, it depends on the major. I know I've seen many times where you have a kid that changes his or her major and they end up having to stay a little bit longer. So I think really the question is, why are they there longer than the 4 years? I often see a settlement agreement that says that they'll pay for college, undergraduate college, but in no event beyond the kid turning age 22 or 23. I don't really love those. I don't really love those provisions, because I think that they don't take into consideration why the kid is in school longer. So, maybe the kid took a leave of absence for a medical reason and then had to go back. So there could be any number of reasons why the child is in school longer. But I think the short answer to this is, as long as they're diligently pursuing their education and they're passing, doing well enough, I think you're on the hook.
Well, and I will say, just one thing to keep in mind, generally speaking, judges can override what's in your settlement agreement, because anything regarding your child, any support provisions regarding your child, the judge does not have to abide by. So even if you put in your agreement, let's say you're the parent that wants to not pay anymore, even if the agreement says you're only going to pay the 22 or 23 or only 4 years, if the child had some reason why they're in school longer, the judge can say, I don't care what's in your agreement, because there is law out there that says that the parents cannot negotiate away the rights of the child. So,
Yeah.
so just keep that in mind whenever you do these agreements, that just because your agreement says something doesn't mean it's going to be so. In fact, I've started in my emancipation provisions, I've started just saying pursuant to New Jersey law. Because I think if you start trying to characterize exactly when it's going to terminate, you're going to automatically miss some situation that's going to come up and you're going to lead to more disputes. So just say pursuant to New Jersey law, and then that usually means when they graduate from undergrad, unless they're an undergrad for
Yeah,
you know,
and
7 years or
we
something.
did talk about in another show the new statute with respect to child support and it potentially terminating when the child turns age 19. We don't have enough time to get into that again, but we'll post a link on our Facebook page so that people can listen to that if that's something that's relevant to their situation.
Right, and also whether or not the child's making the right kind of grades, whether they're behaving. I've had this come up many, many times where a child, has a 2.0 GPA. I mean, to me, that means they're not trying. And if they are trying, they're in the wrong school. Maybe they should be in community college, not a college that's expensive. And then behavior. I mean, are they getting into fights? Have they been suspended, expelled, whatever? Maybe college is not for them. So some other things to keep in mind. So lastly, what happens, number 10, what happens if you cannot reach an agreement? Well, that means you're going to court. And if you're going to court, you're going to spend a lot of money, number one. And number two, the process could take an extreme long time. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the war story today. But what's the first step?
Yeah.
Whenever you have
Well,
to
the
start
first thing you have to do, I always recommend that people start a dialogue if they haven't been doing that already. But generally, you can either start by trying to send a letter from an attorney to the other side and make the suggestion that we exchange documents if necessary and that we really start talking about who's paying for what. If that doesn't work, and I usually don't give a whole lot of time for the other side to reach out to me, you have to file a motion. That's really the only way to do it. You have to initiate a court proceeding.
And then usually this is the kind of motion that will lead to a hearing, which is why we're telling you need to get started no later than January, so that if you file a motion and you go all the way through a hearing, you might get done before September, but I will tell you that's even very unlikely for all the reasons we've told you in past shows about there not being enough judges.
Yeah, that's really the reason that we emphasize starting early, because if you can't agree and you have to involve the court, that's really what's going to take all the time. You have to get that ball rolling very early. You can't just file a motion in August, which I see people do all the time, but it's difficult when you do that because you're just not going to get the relief that you want in time.
Which leads us to war stories.
I don't know if that's really funny or just really sad.
That's what it sounds like in our office every day.
It does.
So,
Or the whatever.
yeah, the whatever. So the war story has to do with this, with college contribution. So I have a case that the motion to compel the father to contribute to college was filed, I believe, in June of 2014. It is now March of 2016, and the case is not resolved. The child started school in September 2014. So now this child is almost done with the second full year of college, and again, we have no resolution to the case.
How, John? How is that possible?
That is the court system that we're all working in. And I will tell you that at the end of the day, you don't know if the judge is going to move quickly, move slowly. You don't know what kind of cooperation you're going to have. So you have to assume it's going to take a very long time and it's not going to resolve very quickly. But in these cases, people are entitled to discovery. They're entitled to exchange information. And so a lot of those kinds of disputes can come up. And in this particular case, the father didn't cooperate with anything. We had to be in front of the judge multiple times to compel him to cooperate. And he was given multiple opportunities because judges, I will say, err on the side of caution, I would say for the most part. They want to give everyone as many opportunities as possible. And this guy didn't cooperate at all. And since he didn't cooperate at all, things moved on and on and on. And now here we are, and what this judge did and what a lot of judges do is they just say, okay, you guys are just going to split things equally, you're going to split things a certain way until we have a hearing. But
Or they just send you to mediation.
yeah, so it's just one thing to keep in mind. You need to keep in mind, how long this process takes, and it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. It's going to take much longer than your attorney tells you. Trust me. I have gotten to the point now where I don't even give people estimates anymore. I just say it's going to take a long time. I can't tell you how long, but it's going to take a long time. So start as early as you can, and I implore everybody to use alternative forms of dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration, any way to make things move much quicker. So I hope this gave everyone a little idea of college contribution. There's much more than what we said today, but if you have any questions for us, feel free to email us at divorceduo@gmail.com. Visit us, learn more about Christina and I at centraljerseyfamilylaw.com. Next week, we're going to be discussing the anatomy of a divorce. It's going to be very exciting. We're bringing our scalpels. Isn't that exciting?
I can't wait.
Yes, and there may be more wine next week too. So we'll see you then. You've been listening to The Divorce Duo on PANJradio.com.